Hi dear students, good morning all. We have completed the chapter atom, but in this video we are going to revise this chapter because some of the students might have not understood some of the concepts. So I am revising this chapter in this video, and this chapter includes mainly three models of an atom. First, that is J.J. Thomson models of atom. Second one, Rutherford, and third one is Bohr's atomic model. In these three models of atom, we are going to study about the structure and the structure of the atom and how the nucleus, electrons, or any subatomic particles are arranged in the nucleus or arranged in the atom. That all we are going to study in this chapter. Mainly that is the thing. Okay, first one is about J.J. Thomson model of an atom. In this model, according to J.J. Thomson, in 1818, he discovered this atom while doing some of the experiment on gases, discharging of electrons through the gases. While doing that experiment, he came to know about the presence of atoms in the molecules or in any matter. So, according to him, he gave the structure of an atom that is known as plum pudding. It is also called as plum pudding model of an atom. According to which the electrons are here. These are the electrons. These are the electrons which are embedded in some plum. So this structure is called as plum pudding model. Means you might be knowing about the watermelon. As in the watermelon, seeds are embedded throughout the volume in different positions. Likewise, in an atom, what happens? Electrons, like a seed, they are embedded over the plum, and where you can, in the remaining part, that is plum part, there is a positive charge according to the J.J. Thomson model. So this structure, the discovery of atom, goes to the J.J. Thomson. According to him, the electrons are embedded in a plum, as in the case of watermelon. So this structure, this model is also known as a plum pudding model of an atom, through which we can he gave the first theoretical explanation for the structure of atom. So based on this theory, his students, that is Rutherford and Marsden, Geiger, they all combinedly started experimenting on the particle called as atom. So they with their experiments, different experiments, that is Rutherford alpha particle scattering experiment, he finally gave the little more information regarding the accurate structure of atom as well as the discovery of the nucleus goes to Rutherford. So in the second model of an atom, the Rutherford, Geiger and Marsden, they continued the study of J.J. Thomson, and with the help of alpha particle scattering experiment, gave the structure of atom. According to which I have drawn the experimental setup of Rutherford alpha scattering experiment. So here he has taken one radioactive element. Radioactive element means an element which is unstable and tries to attain stability by liberating some amount of energy, and also with respect to also liberate some subparticles. For an example, if I consider uranium is an highly unstable atom, that is also radioactive element, radioactive nucleus. What happens if the element is unstable? What happens? They tries to attain stability by liberating some amount of energy as well as some amount of some particles. In that matter, what happens if I consider a radioactive nucleus which produces or which gives rise to the alpha particle, which are alpha sources. Before that, what is alpha source? Alpha is nothing but it is similar to helium nucleus. The charge is plus 2, that is helium nucleus. Alpha particle nothing but it is a helium nucleus. So he took one alpha source, alpha particle, which the radioactive element which liberates, which gives rise to, which produces the alpha particle. Such type of sources, alpha particle sources, are chosen here. That alpha source is kept in a lead shield. Why? Because if I consider a radioactive element, that element will be liberating the energy as well as the alpha sources in all direction, 360 degree. Throughout the direction, it will be producing the alpha particle. But for our experiment, what happens, what we need, it is a collimated beam of alpha sources in a single line manner. So Rutherford, what he did, he placed the alpha source inside the lead shield. Lead, he used the lead because lead is a material which does not allow the radioactive elements or the radiations to does not pass through it. So he used the lead shield around surrounding the alpha source and made one fine way to make the alpha particle to pass through it. So he used the lead shield, and the beam of alpha particles, light rays of alpha particles are passing through this hole, and again in the direction of passing of alpha particle he placed lead collimators, lead tubes he used, because if the alpha means from this lead shield, what happens, there is a coming out of alpha sources that again may have a chance of spreading of alpha particles. Alpha particle may scatter. So to avoid that, to get the collimated single line beam of alpha sources, what he used? He used the collimators in the direction of propagation, in the direction of motion of the alpha particle. He placed 2 lead collimators, through which the alpha particle started moving in a single line manner, in a single line. So what happens next? That source, alpha particle source, which is collimated, is made to fall on the gold foil. Here gold foil is used, and with the that too of the size of that is 2 into 10 raised to minus 7 meter. That much very thin gold foil is used. Because if I use the gold foil of a higher thickness, what happens, there is a concentration of atoms, gold nucleus will be more. Then we can't understand the alpha particle, the collimated alpha particle has interacted with the which of the atoms in the gold nucleus, that we can't understand. So what Rutherford, what he chose? He chose the gold foil of thickness 2 into 10 raised to minus 7 meter, so that we can guess the interaction between the alpha particle and the gold nucleus. Then after, what happens, if after the interaction of gold foil with the alpha particle will start scattering in a different direction. To study the variation of scattering of the alpha particles, what he used? He used ZNS screen around the gold foil. This is a ZNS screen, zinc sulfide screen. Why? What is the purpose of using ZNS screen? Because ZNS screen on interaction with the alpha particle produces scintillation, patches of light. Scintillation nothing but patches of light. Based on that patches of light, we can guess the alpha particle has traveled in this direction. Likewise, we can guess that. So he used ZNS screen, and to study about that interaction, again what he used? He used a microscope, movable microscope. It can movable throughout the 360 degree. So such type of microscope he used, so that to study the patches of light, scintillation. means where that scattered alpha particle goes, where it has been scattered. To know that, he used this microscope, and after studying the system, means after studying this experiment, he came to some of the conclusions and drawn this graph. That is, on y-axis he has taken number of alpha particles scattered, and on x-axis he chose the different scattering angle. Means he is studying for different angle of scattering. For different angle of scattering, what happens to the number of alpha particle, that he was studying. So he studied for first zero angle of incidence, zero angle of scattering angle, that is direct interaction. What happens for zero angle? He got maximum number of scattered alpha particle, and then he goes on increases the angle of scattering angle. He goes on increases. What happens? The number of alpha particle will goes on reduces. Means the alpha particles are traveling, maximum number of alpha particles traveling in a direct manner. Only few of them are scattering. And what is the reason behind this? He gone through these ideas and gave some ideas, nothing but postulates of Rutherford alpha scattering model, that we shall study now, students. Now I am explaining the theoretical explanation given by the Rutherford based on the alpha particle scattering experiment. Okay, I have explained this graph. According to the Rutherford scattering experiment, he draw the graph of number of alpha particle with respect to different scattering angle. As the scattering angle goes on increases, what happens to the number of particles scattered? That also goes on decreases. Based on this explanation or the graph, he concluded some of the points. That is, if I consider a scattering angle theta is equals to 0, then the number of particles are more. So which means the maximum number of alpha particle which are incidented on the gold nucleus just pass directly through the gold foil. Means here these are the some alpha particles and this one is a gold nucleus. Okay, this one is a gold nucleus, and I am passing the alpha particles here. The alpha particles comes like this and directly moves through the gold foil. Why? If it is moving in a same direction as it has been incident, which means it consisting of a large number of free spaces. These are the free spaces here. So it is directly moving through the gold foil. So most of the alpha particle passed straight without any deviation. Okay, next one is about 0.14% of alpha particle which has been incidented that moves in a large angle. Means due to the since the gold nucleus is positively charged and it will be containing some of the electrons in its orbits. Okay, due to the interaction when an alpha particles also positively charged nucleus. So positive and the positive of the nucleus, due to the interaction between the positive and positive, what happens? Positive repel each other. So if the electrons if the alpha particle which are nearer to the nucleus, they got just deviated from its original path because of the force of the nucleus, that is positive action of the nucleus. And if I consider an electron here, I will consider this as a nucleus and one electron at this point. Okay, if an alpha particle, electron means negative charge, and alpha particle which comes to this negative charge, what happens? Positive negative, it will attract, means which are nearer to the electrons, they bend towards the electron. Again there is a deviation, means there occurs some scattering of the alpha particle. They just got it deviated nearer the electrons. If I consider the nucleus of the gold foil, they goes away from the nucleus. So you can observe the scattering here. So in that means 0.14, very little percentage of the incident particle deviate by large angles. And the next point he gave that 1 of 8,000, if I am implementing 8,000 alpha particles to a gold nucleus, one gold nucleus is there and I am passing 8,000 alpha particles, then what happens? Only 1 in 8,000 will get deviated by more than 90 degree, means alpha particle which comes like this and goes like this, or it traces the same path which has traveled. So 1 in 8,000 got deviated by more than 90 degree. These are the observations made by the Rutherford, and I have also explained the reasons here. Because of presence of the nucleus, in 1 in 8,000 they scattered by more than 90 degree, means it must be having the same charge as that of the alpha particle. Same charge means positive. So the nucleus, the discovery of the nucleus goes to Rutherford because of this, based on this experiment. So nucleus is positively charged, and the interaction between the positive charge, what happens? It repels. So the alpha particle which comes to the nucleus, nearer to the nucleus or onto the nucleus, it will directly repelled back by the nucleus, force of the nucleus, positive interaction. And also I have explained includes large empty spaces because of this motion of alpha particles directly as it passes through the nucleus. So these are the reasons behind the reasons explained by the Rutherford. And according to these reasons and these ideas of the Rutherford alpha particle scattering experiment, he postulated or he gave the theoretical explanation based on these reasons. First one is distance of closest approach. Here I have drawn the picture of alpha particle scattering experiment. If I consider this is the atom and it consisting of nucleuses which is positively charged. These are the trajectories of the alpha particle. Alpha particles are moving like this. The one alpha particle which is totally away from the nucleus, what happens? They directly passes because of empty space here. If there is a electron in the path of the alpha particle, they got just deviated because of the interaction between the positive and negative. Okay. If I comes nearer to the nucleus, what happens? The alpha particle just got directly passed here. The next alpha particle which is little bit nearer to the nucleus, what happens? They got deviated in a large angle, that is 0.14% of alpha particle got deviated with a large angle by making some angle, scattering angle, that is scattering angle theta, we call it as theta. Okay. Next one, a particle which is directly directed towards the center of the nucleus, that will stop here and moves in a or traces the same path as it has been traveled. Okay, based on these explanation, the theoretical explanation is given, that is some of the parameters are given here. That is first one, distance of closest approach, and next one is impact parameter. What is distance of closest approach? Distance of closest approach. Alpha particle is approaching the nucleus. At what distance? At certain distance, the alpha particle travels towards the nucleus and stops there and travels back or traces the same path. Why? What is the reason behind it? Because the gold nucleus, if I consider, it is a positive charge, and here the positively charged helium nucleus is coming towards it. Okay, what is the interaction between positive? There is a repulsion. So the positive nucleus comes to the positive nucleus and stops due to the positivity. There is some certain limit for this positivity. At that limit it will stop, and due to the force only, what happens? It will travel back. This is based on the positive and negative charge explanation. If I go for the forces, what happens? If an alpha particle is moving with a high velocity, if there is a velocity, we are considering the kinetic energy. The kinetic energy goes on, reduces here because of this nucleus force. The kinetic energy goes on, reduces, but the potential energy goes on increases because of conservation of energy. According to law of conservation, what happens? The helium nucleus loses kinetic energy and stops at certain point. At that point, what happens? It has high potential energy because of the nucleus, and the distance between those 2 points, the point where the alpha particle stops and the distance between the center of the nucleus and the point where the alpha particle stop, that is called as distance of closest approach. Okay, it got high potential energy, and due to that high potential energy only, what happens? It will start again repelling back, or it will travel in a manner where it has come from. So again the potential energy goes on, reduces, it gains the kinetic energy. So at that point, what happens? There we can observe the conservation of energy, and the distance between the center of the nucleus and the point where the alpha particles stop is called as distance of closest approach. Okay, and according to that only we have derived the value equation for the distance of closest approach. At this point we can observe the conservation law of energy. Kinetic energy is equals to electrostatic potential energy of a gold nucleus. So half mv square kinetic energy, half mv square is equals to electrostatic force, that is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Zd into 2e. Here q1 q2 by r. Q1 nothing but charge of the alpha particle, q2 nothing but charge of the gold nucleus. Charge of the gold nucleus is Zd and helium particle charge is 2e. So on deriving this equation, we need to know the value of distance of closest approach. So r0 is equals to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught 2 Zd square by Ke kinetic energy. This gives the value of r0, that is distance of closest approach. From the application of this equation, means if I consider a helium nucleus of some amount of energy which is approaching the nucleus, charge of the nucleus is known and charge of the gold nucleus is known. On substituting all that data, you are going to get the answer, that is r0, in terms of 10 raised to minus 15. That is this distance distance of closest approach. This distance is of the order of 10 raised to minus 15 meters, which means the radius, if I consider the radius of the nucleus must be smaller than r0. If I consider the nucleus here and this distance is r0, the radius of the nucleus must be smaller than this r0 value. So according to this equation only, we can guess the size of the nucleus, that is of the order of 10 raised to minus 10 meter, that is 1 angstrom units. So according to the Rutherford model, we can guess, he gave the value of size of the nucleus. Okay, similarly he gave another parameter, that is impact parameter. Impact parameter means impaction of alpha particle on the nucleus, gold nucleus. How it is impacted means, as I have explained here, the alpha particles which are away from the nucleus, they does not have any impact on the nucleus, gold nucleus. Similarly, if I consider the alpha particle which is nearer to the nucleus, gold nucleus, what happens? They got scattered. So the distance, the perpendicular distance, if I consider the nucleus and one axial line here, imaginary line, axial line, and the perpendicular distance between the initial velocity vector of the alpha particle and the center of the nucleus is known as impact parameter. Here theta is included here. Theta means scattering angle also included. Means the perpendicular distance between the initial velocity vector. Initially it has no impact on the nucleus. After the interaction only it got deviated. So we are considering the initial velocity vector here. So this perpendicular distance between the initial velocity vector and the center of the nucleus is called as impact parameter. And mathematically we can give the value as b is equals to r0 cot theta by 2. R0 means distance of closest approach. That is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught 2 z square by kinetic energy into cot of theta by 2. Means impact parameter depends on scattering angle. These are the some of the explanation, theoretical explanation given by the Rutherford, through which we can postulate the statements of the experiment, Rutherford scattering experiment or Rutherford model of an atom. And that one is, okay, from these data we can postulate the Rutherford model. First one about the charge of the nucleus. According to this, we can conclude that the nucleus, there is a presence of the nucleus and its charge is positive. And next one is about size of the nucleus. Based on the explanation I have explained here, based on the distance of closest approach, the nucleus must be of the order of 10 raised to lesser than the 10 raised to minus 15. And that is, again, if I separately calculate those values, we can come to know that the size of the nucleus is 10 raised to minus 10. And atom as a whole, if I consider atom as a whole, it is a neutral means has no charge. Atom means it is consisting of nucleus which is positively charged and also electrons which are of negatively charged. So totally if I consider an atom, it is a neutral. These are the some of the postulate that I have been explained. Just I am giving a brief introduction about that postulates. And there is again some of the limits, means the theory which could not be explained by Rutherford alpha scattering experiment. Those are, first one is about the stability of the nucleus. According to the Rutherford model, what happens, electrons which are revolving around the nucleus, they are continuously revolving and liberates some amount of energy. While liberating, they loses some energy and totally finally it will fall into the nucleus. Then what happens, the stability of the nucleus goes. So he does not able to explain the stability of the nucleus. Next one, according to the spectrum analysis, what happens, the atoms or any element will be having a line emission spectrum. But if I consider Rutherford model, what happens, electrons will continuously emitting the energy, means which gives rise to continuous emission spectrum. Continuously the energy is liberated, so continuous emission spectrum we will get. But this is inverse with respect to the standard theory, that is atomic spectrum theory. So these two are the limitations of Bohr's atomic model. First one is it does not explain stability and does not explain the line emission spectrum of hydrogen atom. And next we are going for Bohr atomic model, one of the ahead step of this atomic model. And according to that Bohr model, he gave fine structure of those structure of an atom and all that we have students. Now we shall study the third atomic model, that is Bohr's atomic model. First we have J.J. Thomson, next Rutherford, I have explained it, and now the more specific understanding of the atom, that is according to the Bohr atomic model. According to the Bohr's atomic model, he postulated three statements. First one, which gives the information of the orbits, means the electrons which are revolving around the nucleus, how they are revolving. That information is given by the first postulate, which states that electrons revolve around the nucleus in a specific circular, first one is, it is a specific circular stationary non-radiating orbits. The properties of the orbits are explained with the help of first postulate, that is the electrons revolve around the nucleus in a specific path. It traces a specific path. That path or that orbit is of a circular shape. First one is it is circular shape and it is a stationary. The path is stationary, but not the electrons. The path is stationary. Electrons are revolving in that specific stationary path, and one more thing is it is non-radiating. If an electron in its own orbit, revolving in its own orbit, it won't radiate any energy. So that orbit is called as a non-radiating orbit. If it jump to higher level energy level, then what happens? The energy is radiated. So the own path you can call it as the original path of the electron is a non-radiating one. So it is the first postulate which states that electrons revolve around the nucleus in a specific certain circular path which is stationary and non-radiating. Similarly, the next postulate which explains the velocity of an electron means the angle which the electron which is moving in a circular path must possess some velocity. It is possessing some velocity means it has some momentum. Since it is performing a circular path, it should have angular momentum. So the total angular momentum of electrons in that path is the integral multiple of h by 2 pi. Integral multiple nothing but n, principal quantum number we can choose. N into h divided by 2 pi. The value of that angular momentum is of the order of n into h by 2 pi. So with the help of this equation we can get the velocity of an electron. And similarly, the third postulate which explains the energy of an electron in those orbits. Okay, according to which when an electron jumps from higher energy to lower energy. Why it jumps? Because if I consider an electron in a first orbit, it is the home orbit of the electron is first orbit. I will give energy from the external source. If the energy is supplied, what happens? The electron gains some energy and jumps to higher orbit. And what happens there? It remains for a few minutes, and after that again it will come back to its original path. While coming back, it radiates the energy which has taken from the outside source, any outside source. So the energy is liberated. How much amount of energy is liberated? That is given by the difference between the two energy levels. Higher energy level minus lower energy level gives the amount of energy liberated by the electron, that is in the form of photon. Energy of photon is h nu. So E2 minus E1 is equals to h nu. So the third postulate gives the explanation for the energy. Similarly, second one for the velocity and the first one for the radius of the orbit. Based on these applications of the postulate, we are deriving the values of radius, velocity and energy. So I have written the equation, how the radius equation is derived, that I have written here. According to the first postulate, what it says, the electron in its original path means stationary path, it performs circular motion with a stationary path and non-radiating. If I consider the first point here, stationary path means electrons continuously revolving in its same path because of the force of the nucleus and the electron. Both will be having certain forces. That if that force is balanced, only then the electrons will revolve. If the unbalanced force occurs there, what happens? It may come into the nucleus or it may go away from the nucleus. So to move in its original path or its own path, it must possess some balanced forces. What are those balanced forces? First one is electrostatic force of the nucleus. Nucleus has some force on the electrons. That force is electrostatic force, and it is balanced by centripetal force of the electron. The electrons revolving around the nucleus, so it must possess some centripetal force. So if both the forces are balanced, only then the electrons revolve around the nucleus. Otherwise, it may go away from the nucleus or it may fall into the nucleus. So at that condition, using that condition, electrostatic force of attraction is equal to centripetal force. Means electrostatic force means 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Ze Q1 Q2 by R square. Here Q1 is charge of the nucleus, Q2 is charge of an electron. So here charge of the nucleus is Z into E and charge of the electron is E. So Ze square by R square. 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Ze square by R square is the electrostatic force of the nucleus. Similarly, it is balanced by centripetal force of the electron. So, centripetal force is mv square by r. Here m, mass of the electron, v, velocity with which it is revolving around the nucleus, r, radius of the orbit, that is the path distance between the nucleus and the orbit. Using this equation, on simplifying, and also from the equation mvr is equal to nh by 2 pi, second postulate, using the velocity, angular momentum, conservation of angular momentum, you can call that. Using that equation, using both of these equations, we will arrive at the radius of the equation, that is r is equal to n square h square epsilon naught divided by pi m z square. This equation is the equation of radius of the nucleus. This is the radius of the nucleus, radius of the orbits. If I consider n is equals to 1, first orbit, we will get the value of radius of first orbit. N is equals to 2 means which is a principal quantum number. N is equals to, you can substitute 1, 2, 3 likewise. H, you know that Planck's constant, value of Planck's constant. Epsilon, permittivity, space, free space, and pi, it is constant value. M, mass of an electron. Z, nucleus means atomic number of the nucleus, and E, charge of an electron. You know these, you will be knowing these quantities, parameters. On substitute that values. Here, if I consider for hydrogen atom, Bohr's atomic model is mainly explained for hydrogen and hydrogen-like atoms. So the atomic number should be 1. So Z is equals to 1, and if I calculate it for first orbit, N is equals to 1, we will get the value as R1, radius of first orbit is 0.5 angstrom units. Angstrom means 10 raised to minus 10 meters. So similarly, if I go on calculating the radius of different orbits, R1, that is R1 is to R2 is to R3, that will give 1 is to 4 is to 9, means the radius goes on increases. That is the main thing here we have to consider. As the number of orbit goes on increases, radius also goes on increases with raised to power. R is directly proportional to n square. This is main thing we have to remember, and the equation. Based on this equation, you may get some numerical problems. Okay, next one, we are studying the velocity of an electron. Similarly, the energy of an electron in different orbit levels. Okay, dear students, now we shall discuss the second postulate as well as third postulate, that is, which gives the equation or expression for velocity and energy. Okay, from second postulate, that is, angular momentum of an electron is the integral multiple of h by 2 pi. So we have mvr is equals to nh by 2 pi, that is second postulate. Since we have derived the value of r here, radius of the equation has been derived, and that is r is equals to n square h square epsilon naught by pi m z square. If you want to substitute z value, n value, you can do that also. But in general equation we are deriving here. So on substituting the value of r in this equation, mv into this much is equals to nh by 2 pi. And on simplification, if there are any cancellation terms, we have to cancel it. And on simplifying it, we are getting the velocity, that is v is equals to z e square divided by 2 epsilon naught into n into h, which means through this equation we can derive or we can get the value of velocity in a specific orbits. So z is a constant, e, again charge of an electron, is a constant, 2 epsilon naught and h, all are constants. The variable factor is here n. For different number of orbits, you can calculate the velocity. So generally we can get that velocity is inversely proportional to n, as radius is directly proportional to n square. Radius is directly proportional to n square, velocity is inversely proportional to n, which means as you go away from the nucleus, means number of orbits are increasing, velocity goes on decreasing, means velocity at certain point becomes 0, less, it will become less. So as the velocity, as the number of orbits goes on increases, velocity goes on decreases. But with respect to radius, if I consider, as the square of the orbits, number of orbits goes on increases, radius also goes on increases. Both are directly proportional. Here velocity is inversely proportional to the orbit. Similarly, with the help of third postulate, we are deriving the value of energy. That is, if an electron moving in an orbit, it must possess some velocity, some energy. That is, the total energy is kinetic energy and potential energy. Kinetic energy due to motion and potential energy with respect to the position of orbits of electron in those orbits. So it will possess both the energies. So kinetic energy is half mv square. Using first postulate, while deriving first postulate, we have discussed that electrostatic force is equals to the centripetal force. From that basis, we are getting the value of mv square. That is, mv square by r is equals to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught z square by r square. Using this equation, we have the value of mv square, and finally we got the kinetic energy is equals to 1 by 2 into 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught z square by r. This is about the kinetic energy, and also we must have to calculate the potential energy of electron. So potential energy is equals to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Ze q1 q2 by r. Here z q1 is charge of the nucleus, that is z into e. q2 is charge of an electron, that is a negative e, minus, it is in the form of it is a negative energy, so minus e by r. Here we have to consider the negative sign of the new electron, that is the charge of the electron. So minus m z square e power 4 by 8 epsilon naught pi n square h square. That is the total energy of the nucleus. Means on adding these two equations 1 and 2, on adding kinetic energy and potential energy, we will get the total energy of the system, that is minus mz square e square by 8 pi epsilon naught square n square h square. This equation gives the energy of electron in specific orbits, as we have compared here. Now I am comparing with respect to the energy level. So these are some constant parameters. On substituting those value, E is equals to minus 13.6 by n square in terms of electron volt. This equation is in terms of joules. On dividing with respect to electron, the charge of an electron, we are getting in the form of electron volt. So this is the energy of electrons in specific orbits of hydrogen atom. So that is E is equals to minus 13.6 by n square, which means E is inversely proportional to n square. These data are very important here, as the variation of, with respect to the variation of orbits, what happens to radius, velocity and energy, that you must know. So as number of orbits increases, radius also increases with the root, and as the number of orbit increases, velocity goes on reduces. As the number of orbits increases, the energy reduces by root. These are some important derivatives obtained from the Bohr's atomic postulate, and using this same energy level, we are deriving the energy semi-empirical formula, that is a wave number equation for a wave number 1 by lambda is equals to r into 1 by n1 square minus 1 by n2 square. Using that equation, the Bohr gave structure line emission spectrum of hydrogen atom, that we shall discuss now. We are studying the next part of the Bohr's atomic model, that is the main application of Bohr's atomic model. How we can obtain the structure of atom or a hydrogen atom with the help of Bohr's atomic model. That is the main thing here we are studying. And using the energy equations, we are deriving the Rydberg values, Rydberg relation, or it is also known as semi-empirical formula. And mainly we are discussing the line spectrum of hydrogen atom. When an energy is given to hydrogen atom, the electrons in that orbits or in the electrons in an atom excites to a higher energy levels. While coming back, it radiates some amount of energy. How much amount of energy is liberated with respect to different energy levels, that we are studying. Using the variation of energies, we have the different series of spectrum, that is you know that Lyman, Balmer, Paschen, Brackett and Pfund. These series, how they got originated, that we are studying now. Okay, using Here we are studying the energy spectrum of hydrogen atom with the help of Bohr's atomic model, with the help of energy relation. What we have derived, that is E is equals to minus mz square e power 4 by 8 pi epsilon naught square n square h square. This is what we have derived, and also got the relation between energy and the orbits, that is E is equals to minus 13.6 divided by n square. E is inversely proportional to minus n square, that you must know. Okay. Also, using the third postulate, that is the energy difference between the energy levels, E is liberated in the form of photon. So E2 minus E1 is equals to h nu, you know, and we know these two equations. Using these two equations, I am substituting the value of E, energy, in this equation. So for 2, energy level 2, I am considering generally N2. N2, if I considering an electron jumping from energy level N2 to N1. So what is the energy of N2 level, that we must calculate. So En2 is equals to this much, where N is equals to N2, that much. So simplifying the value of N here. Similarly, the energy level of N1. So En1 is equals to, in the place of N, I am substituting N1. So it becomes minus z square, mz square e power 4 divided by 8 pi epsilon naught square N1 square h square. And also here we are deriving with respect to the wavelength. So we know the relation between frequency and wavelength, that is mu is equals to c by lambda. So on substituting these three equations, 2, 3, 4 in equation number 1, and on substituting and simplification, we will arrive at this equation. 1 by lambda is equals to mz square e power 4 by 8 epsilon naught h square into 1 by n1 square minus 1 by n2 square. We have derived this equation, just I have directly written here for your understanding purpose. Okay. So this is what we are arriving at using this by simplifying this equation, these equations. So these all terms are constant here. M constant, Z, E, all these things are constant. So on generalizing these constant, we will write the R value of R, that is a Rydberg constant. That the value is known as 1.09, 7 into 10 raised to 7 per meter. So 1 by lambda is equals to R into 1 by n1 square minus 1 by n2 square is the Rydberg relation, or it is also known as semi-empirical formula. Using this equation, we can get the line spectrum of hydrogen, how the different energies are liberated, by substituting the values of N1 and N2. N2 refers to the energy level, higher energy level. N1 refers to the lower energy level, where the electron jumps to. N2 is where the electron jumps from. Okay. So similarly, on substituting these values, if an electron jumps from higher energy level to first level, N1 is equals to 1. Whenever the electron jumps from higher, any of the higher, 2, 3, 4, N2 is 2, 3, 4, to the first energy level, then we will get one series of spectrum, that is Lyman series. The energy of total energy, maximum energy, is minus 13.6 electron volt. How we got this equation? Value of value that minus 13.6 means with the help of energy relation. E is equals to minus 13.6 divided by n square. N means where the electron jumps to energy level. So n is equals to 1 here. See here, n is equals to 1. So for n is equals to 1, the energy is minus 13.6. Similarly, if n is equals to 2, what happens? Energy is minus 3.4. Energy is equals to 3. Orbit is third orbit. Energy is minus 1.5. Similarly, the value goes on reduces. The energy value goes on reduces. And for that energy levels, I am drawing the line spectrum of hydrogen atom here. If an electron jumps from higher orbit, it may be n is equals to infinity, or n is equals to 5, 10. Take for example 10, 10 to 1, 9 to 1, 8 to 1. For first orbit, if an electron jumps, it liberates energy. That energies are considered under Lyman series. Similarly, if an electron jumps from higher energy to second energy level, n is equals to 2, n is equals to 3, 4, 5, 2, n is equals to 2, what happens? We will get Balmer series. Similarly, for n is equals to 3, if an electron jumps from higher energy to third orbit, we are arriving it at Paschen series. Similarly, n is equals to 4, from higher energy orbit to fourth orbit, we will get the bracket series. Similarly, n is equals to 6, 7, 8 to n is equals to 5, that we will get the P fund series or fund series. Using these data, if you know the values, orbital energy values, so on substituting those values in this equation, we will get the wavelength of each spectral line. Separately we can calculate it. With the help of these spectral lines or the structure of a spectral series of hydrogen atom obtained with the help of formula, we can calculate some of the parameters such as excitation energy and ionization energy. What is excitation energy? It is energy required to, for an electron to jump from lower orbit to any of the higher orbit. That is excitation energy. And another parameter is ionization energy. Ionization means forming of ion from an atom. When it happens? When an electron or some of the particles removed from an stable atom. From an atom, if we are removing an electron, that atom possesses certain positivity, so it becomes ion. That means ionization energy means the amount of energy required to remove an electron from its ground state to ground state. That is ionization energy. For an hydrogen atom, if I am considering the energy of hydrogen atom is minus 13.6 electron volt, means you need to supply 13 plus 13.6 electron volt of energy to remove an electron from its first orbit completely. Then it will become ion. So these are the explanation given based on the Bohr's atomic model. And one of the main merit of that Bohr's atomic model is Bohr explained the structure of atom with respect to the atomic spectra and complete structure of hydrogen and hydrogen like atom, that has been completely given. And main thing, the drawbacks we need to consider here, because for further studies those drawbacks will help you. So what are the drawbacks of Bohr's atomic model? Means the Bohr's atomic model only explains the structure of hydrogen and hydrogen like atom, means Z is equals to 1, atomic number must be equals to 1. For higher orbit, higher atoms, the structure cannot be explained, or the structure of fine structure or those cannot be explained with the help of Bohr's atomic model. And another one thing, he has explained the fine line emissions. Line emissions are given here, but according to the atomic spectra, there are some more fine lines between these lines, energy levels. Those fine line structure cannot be explained with the help of Bohr's atomic model. These are some of the drawbacks. And also main thing, it cannot give the information of intensities of these lines. He cannot explain the intensities, just give the energy values of those spectral lines. But what about the intensity? What are the remaining properties of those lines? He cannot explain. Based on these demerits, the next level of fourth atomic model is established, which is not for your syllabus. This is actually the complete syllabus of your atom chapter. First we have discussed first model, second model and third model with the help of atomic spectra. Okay, thank you.